Hi folks, welcome to this final video in our Chapter 6 on formulating the reward and compensation strategy. In this segment, we're going to look at some very specific issues that relate to formulating the reward strategy as it relates to workers who are contingent or part-time, those executives, senior level executives, vice presidents and CEOs, and we're also going to have a look at employees who are expatriates and work in foreign subsidiaries of their company. So let's have a look at contingent workers. We're really looking at part-timers or even contract workers who aren't employed on a full-time permanent basis. So this is why I say that would include your contract workers, because it's not really permanent. And, you know, in 1996, and even though this sounds like old data, that was only 19% of Canadian employees, and most of them were choosing to be part-time because, you know, maybe the major breadwinner was earning money outside, and maybe the one that's staying at home wanted to just work part-time as they were raising a family. But that's been almost a 50% increase since 1976. I don't have a statistic on what it is now, but I can tell you it's definitely more than 19%. In fact, it could be dependent on the industry as well. I know in teaching, where I work full-time, in our department specifically, where we have a lot of faculty, almost 50% of that faculty, or thereabouts 50%, is part-time or contract. So again, it's becoming a much more significant piece in the public sector as well as the private sector employers. Other types of contingent workers could include temporary full-time employees, which would be again your contract workers who are only there for a fixed period of time but working full-time hours. Independent contractors, which again could be self-employed or freelance people. People hired from temp agencies, and again, they're becoming a major part of every employer's workforce because employers don't want to commit to the cost of the indirect benefits, that kind of thing, right? Remember we said that the total compensation budget could be anywhere from 40 to 70%, but 20% of that compensation budget could be, as much as 20% could be your indirect benefits, your health care, your pension, your vacation, all that bunch of stuff, right? So employers are trying to whittle away at that compensation budget by hiring contingent workers. Let's look at executives. I think one of the most staggering things, and I think we've all seen it, is that executive pay has been getting bigger while the pay of the rank and file employees has been stagnating and even getting smaller. Again, it says here that's partly because disclosure laws have made executive pay more visible, right? So maybe in our minds we think it's higher, but I guess the point they may be making here is that it's always been relatively high. But I think what I see happening now, and we'll see it in the next graphic, is that more of the executive pay is not necessarily in base pay. A lot of it is in bonuses based on the level to which they achieve. All right. On the negative side, we do have some top executives that have walked out with a lot of money and driven their companies into bankruptcy. But again, you know, that's not just the executive's fault. Probably the board of directors of that corporation, they decided on how they were going to compensate this executive and what the metrics were going to be, how they were going to measure their contribution. And if they didn't do all that stuff right, then it's no wonder sometimes their companies haven't done well. But in the States, and it says here that it leads the world in executive pay. Executive compensation jumped from an average of 43 times the pay of the average worker in 1960 to more than 100 times by 1990. And I dare say that's gone up even more. All right, the minimum wage in the United States, it varies, but you know, here right now in Ontario, it's around $10.25, something like that, and we're now here in January 2014 as I record this. But you know, in the United States, you know, it's like $8 in some states, right? So it's challenging, you know, when you look at what some of these key executives are making vis-a-vis the average worker. Now, if you look at some of the 10 highest paid CEOs, we can see the top 10, $36 million in total compensation, but the base salary is only a small fraction of this total. So what happens? Maybe this includes stock options, bonuses, all kinds of other perks that they may get, right? And you'll notice for most of these executives, look at this guy in Magna, Don Walker, 307,000, but his total compensation is over 14 million. So some of these guys are really raking it in because of the bonuses and the other incentives that they get. Look at banking, right? If you look at banking, you've got, well, I think Ed Clark's on his way out, if not already, but TD Bank, base salary is 1.5 million, but 11 million in bonuses, including bonuses. And we have similar things when we look at the Royal and we look at the Bank of Nova Scotia. So again, we have to be conscious of what is going into this total compensation package. Who's determining what it's going to be is not just the performance level of the executive, but there are usually subcommittees of their board as well that determine, what are we going to bonus these guys on, and what metrics are we looking for, what are the organizational performance measures that need to be met before we pay out, and how frequently are we going to measure how well they're doing in order to determine how much we're going to give out at that point in time. So there's a lot of considerations that really have to go into it. So let's now look at some of the things we need to consider when we decide how much we're going to pay a CEO. The amount of the performance pay relative to the base pay and indirect pay. So again, that's total compensation. That could include not just their base salary, bonuses, and indirect pay. We don't know what the split is here, but we have to think about how much we want to make subject to bonus, right? Based on their performance, which is the lion's share of this column. It would be, because you want to make sure these guys are producing, right? The amount of short-term or annual performance versus long-term pay performance. So again, there might be objectives that they have to achieve in the short versus the long-term. And again, you want to make sure that you have some long-term commitment from these CEOs. You don't want them to leave you midstream, right? Because you're not paying enough or they can get more elsewhere. So you want to make sure that they're committed, right? The nature of the performance pay itself. So again, what constitutes performance pay? Would it be stock options? Would it be bonuses? And how are we going to measure the bonuses? Those kinds of things. So what constitutes performance pay? What about specific performance indicators that we're going to use as a criteria for the performance pay? So what is it that we want them to achieve? And how strict are the performance criteria? They should be very strict, right? And they should also be criteria that the executive has to meet with a great deal of stretch, right? And over what time period are we going to measure the performance? So is 6 months enough? Does it have to be 2 years, 3 years before we get a good handle on how well this person's performed before we give them their pay? You're going to have to look at some short-term things as well in order to incentivate or motivate this executive to perform beyond, the first 6 months of the contract. So you'll find that you need to use a combination of short and long-term review periods and payments. If we look at our expatriate and foreign employees, I think one of the key questions there is whether the employees are going to be foreign nationals, so they're going to be employees from the foreign country where your subsidiary company resides, or are you going to send people over from Canada or the US to go over and manage your business in China or Thailand or wherever it is, right? Because the compensation policy issues could be very different for each of these groups, whether they're foreign nationals or expatriates, because don't forget, the foreign nationals are already in those countries, right? They're already used to the culture, they know the people, they understand the government and how they work, the tax legislation. So there's a lot of things they understand, but maybe the expatriate, the one that's sitting in North America who may go over to this foreign country to manage the business, may not know. So you might have to compensate these people a little bit differently based on what they already know. So the key question is how to create a compensation package that's going to ensure that an expatriate, somebody from North America that goes to a foreign country, doesn't lose financially, okay, compared to their home country peers, but is still cost effective for the company. So again, you want to make sure that you pay them enough to maintain their standard of living and beyond in the foreign country, but you don't want them to be concerned about coming back home after the contract or the period over which they're going to be in the foreign country is up, and then not able to be, based on what they earned in that foreign country, be able to maintain a standard of living from the country they left that they're now trying to go back to, right? So you have to consider a lot of those things. So if we think about it on from these four perspectives, right? What are some of the things we should consider with our expatriate and foreign employees? We need to make sure that we provide a standard of living that's comparable with the home country, right? Not just the country in which the expatriate or the foreign national is going to run the business, but again, if the expatriate's going to go back home after, say, a stint of 4 or 5 years, are they going to be able to maintain their standard of living in that home country, right? Negotiation is always important. You know, the employer and the employee have to negotiate what they believe is an acceptable package to each party. The practice, they talk about it as localization, the practice of paying expatriates the same compensation as local nationals in equivalent positions. So you want to make sure that if you want somebody to go there as a vice president of operations or a CEO or a senior accountant, that you know they're paid fairly based on what that foreign country pays. And again, lump sums. A lot of times what we find is that there are allowances that are paid directly in the home country currency for people. So they might get some bonuses in the expatriates' home country, say somewhere in North America, if say they're working in China, but they'd want to get some bonuses paid to them in their US or Canadian dollars. But there's also something else that comes to mind when they talk about these lump sum payments. I think it's important to know that a lot of companies now are giving what we call mobility bonuses, where employees are going to be paid a premium as an upfront bonus to remove some of the disincentives of transferring. So, you know, some executives might say, well, I got to uproot my family and my including my kids. They got to get set up in different schools. There might be a challenge getting them to acclimate to the foreign country. A whole bunch of different things. So a lot of companies kind of treat it like the sports people get. You know, sports figures get. They get like a signing bonus, right? In order to incentivize them to sign up in the entire contract and stay the length of the contract, to give them a signing bonus. This is kind of the same thing. So it's not necessarily, it could be considered as part of a lump sum, but it's specifically called a mobility bonus, something to get you to sign up right away so that you would be, more inclined to follow through with the contract and go over to that foreign country and work. And again, a lot of times those lump sum payments and again, those signing bonuses or mobility bonuses would be in your home country currency. So if you're in the United States going to China to work, we'd be giving you that bonus in United States currency, American dollars. So now, just as on our final slide, as we always do, make sure that you stay organized, know what's coming due this week, next week, and beyond. Hope you have a great week and enjoy your time in the course, on the job, with your families, whatever your plans are for the week. Have a good one.